changing. Never mind. Hello, YouTube land. This is Nuke Chess. We're going to record a live episode in just a moment. And I just wanted to, for Jason, because he's been here before. So I'm going to do patrons at the end of the episodes now. I'm changing that around. So don't let me forget to do that when we sign out. All right. So let me start for the MP3 feed. Hello, Mixed Nutcases. This is Nuke Chess, and I've got a special episode of Nutty Bites for you where, again, my podcast is being taken over by Jason.
Hi, guys. I'm Jason from the Talk Nerdy to Me podcast. And yes, although I cannot remember the question I asked that spawned this podcast, but it's fine.
I will remind you of this. And with me, as always, is my regular co-host / antagonist.
Hi, I'm Tech.
And for the first time on Nutty Bites, we have Grig Larson.
Yay, that's me.
Hi, Grig.
Although actually not the first time.
Because that's true.
Yeah, he was
a Balticon.
Princess Mononoke. So for the second time.
For the second time.
For the first time, not.
Couldn't have been that memorable. Both of us forgot.
Recording. Yeah. So this is really exciting, and I am happy to have you here. And Jason, this came up because you had a customer show up at your store upset that they couldn't play Horizon Zero Dawn because it forces them to play as a female character. Yes. So you instantly got onto Facebook Messenger and said, we need to do an episode about frail masculinity. And because I am not a man, I'm going to step back and let you all talk about this toxic situation that is not helping any nerd or any man out there. So Jason, why don't you tell us this story?
Yeah. Okay. So for the people who I didn't rant to about this when it first happened, I work at GameStop. It's well known. And so we have people bringing in games and returning games, trading games and so forth. And I kid you not, I sold this game to a guy maybe 2 or 3 days before this incident. He comes back in and he's talking to one of my female employees, and he just comes in. He's really upset. It kind of looks like he's agitated. He throws the game on the counter in front of her and says, I don't want this. I don't like it. I couldn't play it. And she's like, oh, I'm sorry, sir. Well, what was wrong with it? Like we were checking to see if it's defective or something like that. And he goes, just wasn't what I expected. And we're like, okay, what were you expecting? He goes, I just can't play as a woman. And again, he's saying this to a woman. I literally start seeing red because Horizon Zero Dawn is a fantastic game. It is probably one of the few games with a female protagonist who is not overly sexualized, who is the target of the attention of men, and she shuts them down in spectacular fashion.
Yeah, there's not even a kissing scene in this entire game. It's a it's a game about a green-eyed, red-headed 16-year-old huntress in not so skimpy leathers running around the woods with no sex scene, no love plot, no kissing. They didn't go all the way. It's not just like a male character with boobs. She is a full-fledged female character.
Yeah, because the crux of her problem in the story is, and I love it, is because yes, the overarching issue is you're trying to figure out why Earth has been run over by robot dinosaurs, but there's a point in the game, and this isn't a spoiler because it didn't tell you what's going on, but someone tells her, like, you have the opportunity to know all of what's going on, and she says, I don't care. I didn't do this to find out why there's robot dinosaurs running around. I did this to figure out what was going on with my mother, why I was an outcast. Like, those were the things she cared about. They were very selfish, but they were very intrinsic to her as a woman and as a female in this world generally overrun by men.
And the game creators were able to tell this story without resorting to sex and titillation, and they were able to make actually probably one of the best games of the last year. But this guy who comes into your store and says, I can't play as a woman, we had the same problem a few years ago with Mass Effect, where Mass Effect gives you the option to play as one of the two characters, and they had two voice actors voice the male Shepard and the female Shepard, and you could go through the game as either. I've done it as both. The voice acting on the voice actors that they got for FemShep is leagues beyond and way better than the guy they got for male Shep. And it's the better story, it's the better acting, it's the better character. It's also a lot more fun. But the first two games, the company would use male Shep for all of their advertising copy and say, this is Shepard, but he could be a girl too. And all of the fans were screaming, punching themselves in the face, going, no, FemShep is way better. We like FemShep more. And for Mass Effect 3, it was FemShep on the cover, but that was pretty much the end of it. And they always said, you know, male Shep is canon, male Shep is canon, because that's what the game audience wants. Meanwhile, the population, everybody else is behind going, no, we don't. We want FemShep. So I think there's a huge rift between what we're told we want and what we actually want. And the idea, I really believe that your customer that came in that he can't play the game as a woman, so he doesn't want to play the game. I really believe that that is by far the minority.
Mm.
Well, I would have to agree to a certain level amongst the people I surround myself with, but I know that I tend to surround myself with people who are like me and have like opinions that I do, so I tend to live in a little bit of a bubble, and it comes out from time to time. Like, for instance, I grew up in an upper middle class neighborhood. I'm a white male, so there's a lot of white male privilege that I take for granted, and I don't even think about it. And to give you a little bit of a background of some of what I grew up with, I grew up in the 70s when ERA and NOW were coming into power, and there were some backlash of a lot of there were women that were very strong. You saw a lot of women writers coming into the sci-fi scene that wouldn't have ordinarily been given a chance. For instance, I can't remember, Elle Sprague de Camp. A lot of people didn't know that was a woman. And, you know, that's what they did. They published under different pen names. Even Mary Poppins was written by a woman, P.L. Travers, but went by P.L. Travers because they thought, well, if it's written by a woman, no one's going to buy it.
Look at how many episodes of original Star Trek were written by D.C. Fontana.
Yeah, there you go. That's another
woman
good
who
example.
couldn't publish under her own name. Even today, Harry Potter, probably the most popular young adult book series to come out ever, written by a woman who had to publish under the name of J.K. Rowling, because there's no way we're going to buy a book written by a woman.
Well, think about it this way. I mean, think about it in smaller terms, right? Look at video gaming, right? How many people nowadays don't know that Samus Aran is a woman?
Yes. That was a
Right.
big reveal when that came out. I
was
remember.
shocking
that
that you could have an action game with a female lead.
You know, you had like people, they would put female in secondary roles, like Princess Peach, or you would have, like, especially in sci-fi, if you look at a lot of the movies of the 50s and 60s, if there was a strong woman, she was strong until stuff went wrong, and then she ran to the man, and it was all about her love interest, and it was you know, basically, if you were a woman, you were told that, well, in the end, that's what you really want. You want to give up the science. You know, you were the daughter of a scientist. He died. You carried on his stuff only because there was no son in the picture. And then suddenly the strong man comes along, and you're really strong. And you're like, I'm not going to let you tell me what to do. I'm an independent person. And then halfway through the film, she's like, help, the tentacle monster got me. You know, and then she has to be rescued. And you're told, like, well, she thinks she's smart, but she doesn't have street smarts, like, you know, don't go into that dark cabin, you know, or whatever. I used to work at a knife store. My manager was a woman named Tina Brummett, and she was probably, like, when you think about the qualities of a redneck, all the good qualities of a redneck: powerful, strong, independent. And people would come in, and a lot of men would see her at the counter, and their eyes would go right past her, like she was invisible. and they would go to a guy whom she might be training. It might be his first day, and they'll ask a lot of questions. And then when she answers them, the guy would talk back to the guy, and I saw it all the time. And she had to deal with it. Buck Knives, which is an extremely big name in the knife industry,
Absolutely.
is mainly run. I think at least in the late '80s, early '90s, it was like there was only 2 men that worked for the company. It was all run by women. A lot of people didn't know that. I don't know if it's that way today, but that's how it was back then. And whenever I called, I spoke to a woman. The head of ordering was a woman. And I think the president was a woman as well at the time. But getting back into fandom, when I started going to conventions in the early '80s, there was already a backlash about the women that had come to ruin it. And over the years, everyone came to ruin fandom. It was when I started, it was the women. I don't know who was before that, but then it was like the goths are going to ruin fandom, and then the anime fans are going to ruin fandom, and the gamers are going to ruin fandom, and everything's going to ruin fandom. Yet fandom's been around for a while.
No, you're right, and we're so upset that this new group of people are going to come in and they don't know anything. And now for like the last 10 years or so, it's been the whole gamer girl and the whole fake gamer girl thing. A girl walks into a comic book shop. I want to buy the new Guardians of the Galaxy comic. Yeah, well, you only like it because the movie came out, but you weren't a fan. Right. Well, I want to be a fan.
You don't have that nerd street cred, man. You weren't there. You weren't there when I suffered. And it's like, no.
Nobody was a fan of Guardians of the Galaxy until the movie came out. Because before the movie came out, I went on a search for real Guardians of the Galaxy fans. There weren't any. And I know a lot of comic book podcasters.
But you'll find them now. Like, I was always a fan.
Yeah.
That's it.
And don't forget that the Guardians of the Galaxy that made Guardians of the Galaxy famous in the movie, those aren't the original Guardians of the Galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't see the original Guardians of the Galaxy in a movie until their cameos in the second one. That's how crap that comic was appreciated by people. Like, that's how crappy it was appreciated, that they had to be cameos in the sequel to their movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I attended panels, and I ended up talking with some female sci-fi authors over the years. And Anne McCaffrey was the big name that came around in my era. A little bit before my era started, Marion Zimmer Bradley, because she took the Arthurian mythos and really made it centered around women. I mean, Darkover Con for 36 some odd years was just based on that whole thing. And now they're Chesapeake Con or Chessie Con, I think. And they are very still feminine oriented.
That's the one with the cute dragon mascot, right?
Yeah, which is Chessie.
I love that mascot.
Yeah, but in the beginning, I know that a lot of females or women, I hate using females because it just sounds so clinical, like they're some foreign species. The way that I look at women and the way I was raised to look at women is they're just like men, but with different plumbing. So that's about it. It's like it's a difference between hair color. Some people are born with an extra toe or something. It's like there's biologically it doesn't matter, it's like intellectually is what I'm looking for. And I find women to be toe-to-toe with men, and I've never really found any appreciable differences. Cultural maybe, but no, especially in fandom, So you'd had a lot of these authors come out, and I was told, they're going to ruin everything. They're going to make everything Frost Princess or, My Little Pony or things like that. And of course that didn't happen, but a lot of them got their beginnings, oddly enough, because of Star Trek, the original series, which had a few strong female characters. And you mentioned writers as well. And suddenly people saw the future. In the future, women and men are going to be equal. We're going to figure this whole thing out, and nobody's going to care whether anyone's black or redheaded or anything. It's just going to be that way. But as I got older, I found out that there's still a lot of lingering issues. Like people would come in, well, I can't play a female character. Well, why not? Well, I would have loved to have been in this guy's head because I have speculations, but they are only speculations of why this person would come in and say that.
And that's what I think spurred me on to consider this for the podcast topic because it has to be a hangover from misogynistic thought, right? Like anything feminine has got to be soft, weak, pink, girly, you name it, right? Like, so if you can't play a female character in a game, then obviously you must think she's weak or, soft, that without a guy or something, she can't be saved. Even though in Horizon Zero Dawn, she literally saves the lives of several men.
Yeah.
Like, she is,
and then spurns their advances because it's funny. And
man,
Yeah.
God, I don't know if you've got that far, but there's a character who comes onto her and she blows him out of the water. And it's not just,
Jason, are you full of chicken? Watch this.
and it's not like she didn't blow him out of the water like, just being mean or
no, she shuts him down. It was good.
Yes. This straight up lodge. Oh God, it's so good.
So we've got someone in the chat. I bet you can guess who it is.
I bet it's Shane.
Hi, Shane. And Shane says, look at the backlash for the new Doctor Who. Doctor Who can't be a woman. That's going to kill the program.
Doctor Who's an alien.
I know.
I don't even know if the man-woman thing applies here. I don't know why Doctor Who's always human.
Well, my opinion on that, or the way I've always seen it, is we see the Doctor the way that we are comfortable seeing him. So
that's a good point.
His companions are often British, so he's British. It's not just that he's human; he sounds British. And my belief is that when he's on an alien planet, they see him as their species.
Exactly. And they do that in Mass Effect, to bring that up again as well. The blue tentacle girls, the Asari, why do they look human? Well, that's how we see them. But there's a scene that they actually added in where it's a whole bunch of different alien races around a bar, all looking at an Asari and saying, yeah, but her eyes look like the eyes of my species, but her hair looks like the hair of my species. So everybody sees themselves in the Asari, which is why we all find them attractive.
If you look at old medieval pictures of exotic animals, for instance, and they were told like what a lion looked like, but they'd never actually seen one. So what they do is they draw a picture of what they think a lion looks like, and they have these weird human faces. They're much bigger than they are in real life. So it's like how they see lions. And so a lot of other people saw those drawings, saw it the same way. And I think that gives a little bit of insight. If you see things, what you see things as only what you know, and then you use what you know to apply it. And if you don't have a lot of education to deal with this sort of thing, if you see something that you don't understand, it's going to be vastly different than what it turns out to be. So for Doctor Who to be a woman and somebody getting upset about that, what do they see Doctor Who as? That's the real question there, because it has to be a man, because they're projecting, possibly, I'm not a psychologist, but they're possibly projecting their feelings about being a man on Doctor Who, and suddenly it's a woman, and whatever issues they have with women that they haven't figured out is suddenly being thrown onto a woman's face, and they lose all concept of like, it's just really just a show and I should really just relax. They take it personally and they get very, very angry.
I haven't weighed in on the Doctor Who debate yet, so this will be my first hat in the ring. And this is what this is the way I see it, and that if they want to bring in if they want to make Doctor Who female, fine, who cares? As long as it's done for the right reason. If they have a story that they want to say and they want to do it for the story's sake, then that's cool. If they want to do it because, well, this will shut the fans up, or we received a lot of mail from people who want Doctor Who to be a woman, I guess we'd better do it for the ratings. As long as it's done for the right reasons, I'm all for it. If it's done to pander or to acquiesce to the fans, or if it's done merely for ratings, then it's not done legitimately and it shouldn't be done at all.
Yeah, I think to add on to that is if you're not writing the character and the story correctly, it doesn't matter who's cast. if
'cause it's all
they've given up and said, well, we're just going to cast a woman and we're going to write this exact same thing, or we're going to write it in an exploitive way, I don't think any fan will be happy with that. We want real character development. We want a real story going on. I wanted
But you
to
do,
comment.
you have to know that when decisions like this are made, ultimately, and this will remove the curtain for a lot of people. Ultimately, the only reason these shows are created or any of this media is created is to make money.
Yes.
Now there are probably independent artists out there who are doing it, artists, gratis artists, art for the sake of art, and I would agree with that statement. But I do want to just put there that probably Doctor Who being a woman was something that finally a marketing group said, like, we'll give it a try. We'll see what happens. We know we'll get backlash, but I think our audience is sophisticated enough to handle this. But another question is, who's going to be the next Doctor after her? That will probably add more clarity to their decision process.
Yeah, and I want to add a little bit on to what you were saying before, Grig, about what does it say about the people that get upset about these things? What does that say about what they see in, say, Doctor Who or in the character in the video game? I've also seen a lot of upset from women about Doctor Who being a woman, cast as a woman, and I think that the same applies there, and that has to do with what women see men as and what they see as themselves as women.
I completely agree with that.
And I think that a lot of women, when things like this happen and people say, well, you're a woman, why are you upset? Shouldn't you be happy? And it's because they have a lot that they have to deal with. Women can be sexist against women, this is true for any oppressed group. We live in a society that is racist. So everyone is a bit racist. And there's a great song about that from Avenue Q.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think a lot of us need to remember when we talk about these things, because so many times somebody will say, well, I am of this oppressed group, so I can tell you what it is. Well, no, you can tell us what your experience is.
Exactly.
Which is very important.
Even before the feminist movement, this has been going on. This has been going on in Hollywood, and this is the thing. I think that the fragile white man in charge. This is not a new thing, and this is what annoys me: is that we are collectively, we white dudes, are so weak and so afraid of different groups of people taking over our things that we come up with these crazy rules, like, oh, they have to have the option to play as a man, because if they're playing as a woman, they're not going to like the game. But if you go back even further, let's I will illustrate my point with this list here. Barry Manilow's real name is Barry Allen Pincus. Winona Ryder's real name is Winona Horowitz. David Copperfield's real name is David Kotkin. Paul Mooney's real name is Mooney Weisenfraud. Lauren Bacall's real name is Betty Jane Persky. Jack Benny's real name is Ben Kubelski. Eddie Cantor's real name is Israel Iskowitz. George Burns' real name is Nathan Birnbaum, etc., etc., etc. You can't have a Jewish name in Hollywood because no one's going to want to go see your movie if there's a Jew in it, so we got to change your name.
That's partially true, but also keep in mind that it used to be, especially in the 1800s and early 1900s, there was a stigma being an actor or an actress. So people use stage names so that in their real jobs, they wouldn't be connected to it. But sure, I do agree with your point that I have heard, like, a Jewish name is death in popular media, or at least it used to be, maybe still is. I don't know.
I think the only ones in Hollywood still to this day that have Jewish sounding names are the Weinsteins, and they are the perennial powerhouse in Hollywood, because if you want to win an Oscar, if you want your movie to get made, if you want to get the best promotion and support for your movie, you go to a Weinstein. And if they trumpet your movie, it's almost guaranteed they're winning an Oscar. But
that also plays into the whole stereotype, though, of who's allowed to be Jewish or who's allowed to be ethnic.
Yeah.
There's a difference between behind the camera and in front of the camera.
Oh,
Just
absolutely.
like how many feminist shows do we have that are out there that are created by men?
And is now a good time to talk about Joss Whedon?
Go right ahead.
No. Hold on. That's a big can of worms. Before we get there, I want to backtrack real quick and talk about what you guys talked about when they were projecting themselves onto the characters in like Doctor Who and stuff like that.
Sure.
I don't think it's 100% that. I think it's 50-50 because I think it's not only what they're projecting, but how they view themselves. Because I think one of the reasons that men can say that they can't play a character in a game that's a woman, or they can't read this book because it's by a woman, or it's about a woman, you know, is because they think they'll be perceived as weak or
100%.
or you know, considered an F word or a sissy or a P word, right? Like they'll think that their friends or whoever will think less of them. And to some extent, they'll even think that women will look at them differently if that's the case. I don't think I've ever met a woman who looked at me any differently when I said, yeah, man, I watched Your Lie in April and I bawled like a baby at the end. That thing was so sad. I'm looking at you also, Madoka Magica, but anyway.
But that's so much of what's going on. It's why can he not play the female character? Because his masculinity is tied to the idea that to be male, I must always be macho. I must always be strong. I must have sexual prowess. I must, always represent these things. Now, Tech, I'm going to ask you this. When MMOs first started, what kind of character did you normally play?
Right, so this is where this was my next point. Thank you, Nutty. If I have an option to play between male and female characters, especially in third-person games, I always choose the female option. And this is a really bad. I won't say bad. This is a really male answer to this thing.
Oh, absolutely. Because
in a third-person game, you are staring at the backside of your character. And if you're telling me that for 100 hours of gameplay, I'm going to have to stare at a backside, I'm going to make it an attractive backside that I enjoy looking at. I am a straight male. I don't like dudes. And if you're telling me that I'm going to have to stare at a butt for 100 hours, I'm going to make it a pretty butt. And that's it. And then if it's a cutscene, especially with new games like Mass Effect, I think that one of the big reasons as to why there's a big draw towards lesbian porn, I've always said sex is sexy. If I'm looking at a sex scene with a guy and a girl, it's only 50% sexy because I don't want to look at the dude. I want to look at the girl.
Remember, 13-year-olds.
Right. If it's two girls, it's 100% sexy.
I think 13-year-olds have heard of pornography. I'm sorry to break that. And some of them even own a porn.
I'm not going any further than that. Trust me, I know the rules. I know the rules.
You know what's funny though?
They watch South Park.
Oh man, this makes me laugh because when I posted on Facebook about this, the first person to comment was Nobilis Reed, and his response was, "I bet he couldn't watch lesbian porn either."
Yeah. Right, about the guy in the store who he couldn't play as a girl. Yeah, I bet he doesn't like lesbian porn either. Right, exactly. So that's the same sort of thing.
And getting to your point there, Tech, that's why a lot of straight women like gay porn.
Okay,
sure.
So
I can see that.
That's fine.
I can see that.
That's 100% man meat right there, baby. Anyway, I still need to start that black coffee in bed podcast. But anyway, man, there's probably some really good Michael Coulter, Idris Elba.
Is that your all Idris Elba podcast?
Yes.
I thought so. Okay, just for the listeners who are unaware.
So, go back to my archives and find the first Attack on Titan podcast I did with T. Morris and Pip Valentine. Yeah, but they brought that up, by the way.
Ooh.
So let's open this can of worms, shall we? Because there's been some recent developments about your boy Joss Whedon.
Woo!
Yeah. Okay. So
feminist icon is now firmly in quotes. So give us some backdrop here. Who was Joss Whedon? Why did we like him, and why do we not kind of like him so much anymore?
Joss Whedon has had his fingers on some of this generation's most influential fandom-based products, right? Let's talk about
phrasing.
It, right?
That's what we found out. Phrasing.
Oh boy. So first up, the thing. His big hit, the one that became a cult classic, was Buffy. Buffy, and it turned out to be a very actually feminine, strong show. I personally wouldn't call it super feminist. I think that Buffy has a lot of problems, but I think it was probably for the time one of the best things out there for women.
It was groundbreaking.
Now, he also had some stuff. I think he did this before Buffy, and I think Grig, you'd probably know better than I would. Because he wrote Alien 4, but
oh no,
yeah, Alien Resurrection.
Did he? I don't know. I really don't know.
yeah, he wrote that.
Well,
no,
okay, he
did,
wrote
and
it.
Then it got script doctored, but they kept his name on it.
Exactly, which is the reverse of what happened with Toy Story. Somebody else wrote it, he script doctored it and made it good. So
yeah, and so we get that, and then of course we get the bombshell that Fox ruined, Firefly. Fox, if you show a show out of order and randomly, no one's gonna like it anyway. That show, I think, is
that's how I watched Yamato, by the way. Starship Yamato out of order because Channel 20 didn't know it was a serial anything. And then I began to figure it out.
That's so painful. You start with Rick Hunter dying? Anyway.
I can't even tell you, but continue. I'm sorry.
No, but and so he started to get this reputation for writing strong, very independent and powerful female characters. And then let's see what other big stuff that he did.
And he's done a lot of things. He was slated to do Wonder Woman for a while, and then that didn't happen. But one of the big things that pushes him into the idea of feminist icon, and I'm doing the finger quotes here. I have a real hard time idolizing any people because you'll always end up getting let down by them. So just remember that the next time you think a celebrity is so amazing, you can always get let down by them. So don't tie too much onto there.
Never meet your heroes. There's a reason that's a rule, right?
Exactly. So, but for his birthday, the fans got together and created an event that has been going on for well over 10 years now. And it's called Can't Stop the Serenity, where people all over the world get together and they watch the movie Serenity to raise money for the charity Equality Now, which is a charity that is based on feminism and helping all people get equality. And it's in his honor. So this is one of the things that made people look at Joss Whedon, sorry, and say that he is a feminist icon. And every time he'd be interviewed, people would say, well, why do you write these strong feminist characters? And his answer would be, because you keep asking me that. Or he talked about
or his other one was, you've never met my mom.
Yeah, you've never met my mom. And these are all very good things. Now, the reason why people are upset is his ex-wife penned a letter exposing how he was basically living a double life. Yeah. And it wasn't, a lot of people think that people are upset because he was having an affair, and they're like, everybody, people have affairs, get over it. The difference is he was leading a double life and not telling his wife that while she was sleeping with him, he was sleeping with other people. That takes away informed consent. And the other issue is that it was people that he had a power structure over.
Yeah, it was stars of his shows.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I don't want to get too deep into, because I really don't want the people that he had relations with to have their work invalidated or their credibility invalidated because of this, because that's not fair to them. But it does go to show that, like, you say that you're one thing and yet you've removed informed consent from your wife here, and you're having sexual relationship with somebody where there is a power structure involved, and it's pretty icky and not really very feminist.
Yeah, it was a blog post, by the way. It was a guest blog post that she did.
That said, I'm sorry to cut you off, but that said, that's not the first time that anyone said anything against Joss Whedon as a trademark feminist. There have been a lot of things that have been brought up, things about handling with some actors, things of some themes in his shows, certain storylines, certain plots, and the freaking nonsense with Avengers. So that apparently you're a monster if you can't have children. There's
right. Oh,
this is not the
what
first.
was that whole storyline?
Yeah.
Oh man, their treatment of Black Widow, and then they make her one of the stars of the movie, and then when the toys come out, they replace her in all the toy sets with other male characters, and they don't make a Black Widow action figure because nobody wants to buy toys of a girl.
Yeah.
Really now.
It's kind of interesting. Like, if you look at the history of Barbie dolls, originally she was kind of like a French model, and this guy marketed it as a toy because before that, the only dolls that girls had were babies. And this was the first one where it was an adult that they could dress up. And now that's really common, so it doesn't seem so groundbreaking, but it was then. And I think they're just still, like, I think if we had more female action figures that were treated not as like, oh, she's a scientist, but she likes the makeup, if you got somebody who's like, she's a scientist and we're not going to bring attention that she's a woman at all because it really doesn't matter. And then you're going to get more girls who want to be scientists. More girls are going to play with this and stuff like that. And I was having this discussion last night. A lot of feminism is about choice. And I don't think a lot of young girls or women are presented with a lot of choices because it's already been made for them, like the Black Widow figure that you mentioned. Like, oh, no, girls are going to like it. And nobody bought it. Well, that's because you didn't have it out. Well, that proves my point that it doesn't sell. Or we had this really crummy version of a doll, and the only people that bought it were the diehard collectors that have to have everything in the set, and now she's a rare collector's item because they only made like 2,000 of them because they said they didn't sell. Well, you didn't get them out of the market. You got to get it out of the market, and you got to get people knowing about it. And then I think you're going to see a lot more women get into fandom, and I'm seeing it now. As a matter of fact, especially from the anime point of view, cosplayers and there's a lot of Japanese animation out there where the women are extremely strong characters. They're the only characters in a lot of these shows, and it's not that they're all wanting to be pretty or in makeup. So
Ghost in the Shell.
Yeah, Ghost in the Shell. Yeah, there you go. So one of the reasons I went into anime was because I saw that as the future of sci-fi, because for some reason I didn't predict CGI at the time. And
you weren't that wrong. It took a while.
Yeah, it took them a while, but it's that was one of the things that first attracted me to it, is that there were strong, and a lot of them aren't really good examples because they're kind of dated, but Project A-ko, Dirty Pair, but there was also Oh My Goddess, which really is something about dealing with relationships, and even though that she is kind of subservient to him as a girlfriend, she's an extremely powerful woman, and all of her sisters.
Belle Dandy is my waifu.
I know. Oh my God! Yeah, seriously.
The best out of the bunch, Revolutionary Girl Utena.
Yeah, there you go. That's another good one. And so all of a sudden there are all these girls and women that come to anime conventions because they see something relevant. They see themselves in these characters. You just got to get it out there. But a lot of the older corporations have really missed the boat as far as promoting it.
And they think that men can't enjoy these things too. They think that we're only going to sell to women. And there was this really great article a while back. I don't remember, but Tech shared where it was from, but Tech shared it with me about how certain toys ended up being gendered. And it's because toy stores, for some reason, decided to start separating boys' toys and girls' toys. And they had to choose where they went. And so Lego decided to go with boys. And they put, I think it was like the Easy Bake Oven in the girls, but neither of them were gendered. It's just where they decided to put them in the toy store. And then it developed this whole gendered thing about it. Meanwhile, I'm sorry, toy stores, you don't need sections for boys and girls. You just put your toys out, like nobody cares. But anyway, they think that boys and men can't enjoy these franchises where the main character is a woman, or you're supposed to play as a woman, or you're supposed to identify with a woman. Meanwhile,
or that
women,
I am so weak
Yeah.
That the only reason I'm going to watch a show with a girl in it is to be titillated.
Yeah. Well,
Yes.
why do you watch Buffy? Oh, because she's hot. No, maybe it has something to do with the cool story.
I've always wanted a superhero show that had a dumpy kind of pear-shaped girl who is trying to be a superhero, but is exceedingly realistic to like somebody that would have to deal with this sort of thing on a day-to-day basis. She wouldn't be sexy. She, you know, would do the gross things that I know that all girls do when they think no one's looking. And the guys do the same thing, you know.
But we're allowed.
Yeah, but you know, it's like it's true. Like if a guy picks his nose and wipes it on the side of the couch, it's like, well, he's being a boy. You know, boys will be boys. If a girl does it, it's like nasty. You know, and it's
Pretty girls don't fart.
Yeah, they don't fart. They just hold it in until they explode.
Exactly.
Now, one thing I wanted to bring up, because you talked about it earlier, that a lot of the basis on feminism is choice, but I think another thing is the imbalance of power being corrected or changed, so you get to see what the opposite of that imbalance is. Because, and I also think that affects why people think that men won't be able to watch it, because it's men making that decision anyway. So they don't want to watch a show where the man isn't in charge, where the man doesn't make the decisions. He doesn't make if he says jump, she doesn't say how high, she says F yourself, right? Like he doesn't want to see that. So they assume all other men don't want to see that. And only women would want to see that.
That's
So
classic
what you're
projection
saying,
there.
Yeah, what you're saying here is that the men making these decisions, saying that men don't want to see this, are the men who are threatened by their already existing power structure going away.
Absolutely. These are because it's the executives, it's the guys in charge, it's the guys that sign the checks that don't want to lose their jobs. So when they say that toy's not going to sell, how do you know that? You haven't tried. All they're doing with everything, whether it's music, movie, books, they're going on what they know works. And if they haven't, okay, so we had a book by a girl, we had a book by a boy. The one by the boy sold more. You're a girl, your book's not going to sell. How do you know? Maybe that book sucked once 80 years ago, but for the last, however many years, they've just been going on these assumptions that we only want to listen to music by girls if it's sexy. Mm-hmm. And it has to be sexual in nature for us to pay attention to it in the age of video. No, it doesn't. I listen to good music. I don't care who sings it. Books. Oh, well, girls' books are frilly and frou-frou. Guys' books are full of action. They'll only want to read action books. Now, what? When I read Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman, I really thought that was two women together writing a book. I didn't know Tracy was a dude. And I read it anyways because I love the Dragonlance series.
Yes, I forgot the guy who wrote Call of Cthulhu. His first name is Sandy, and he actually had somebody impersonating him who was a woman somewhere in the South for years, saying that she was the creator of Call of Cthulhu. Yeah, sometimes those names can be. One thing I want to add about your literature, and this is something from my background. My mother was not somebody who really pressed like what the roles were. As a kid, as a boy, I had a dollhouse. I had stuffed animals. In fact, I still collect them. I don't know if my video feed's going out, but I got this giant pink octopus behind me. And I played with tea sets and kitchen sets. Yet, as a boy, if my friends found out about it, they would make fun of me. And as a boy, you get surrounded and pressured by what masculinity is. And the whole thing goes back to in the 70s, and I think it's still this way. But if you're a child and you have some feminine aspects, you're called gay, or maybe not directly homosexual, like in the sense of having sex, but like called gay because it's another word for sissy, and and you get pressured. So as a kid, when I played with cars and Legos, I played with pretty much like the broad spectrum of different things, but. I read Astrid Lindgren, who is the writer of Pippi Longstocking. I considered her very influential as a role model, not because she was a girl, but because she was independent and strong. And Pippi Longstocking has never been, in my opinion, has never been done right in the States. In Europe, oh my God, it's they're nuts, especially in Sweden where Astrid's from. But As an American reading Pippi Longstocking, it was on the list of things you should read, but it was always in the girls section, along with Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. I read a lot of Judy Blume as a kid. I learned a lot about women's issues as a kid because of that. But it wasn't cool in the late 70s, early 80s when I was through what I guess they call tender years. But I've seen this from that perspective. So there are a lot of men who are like, you like stuffed animals? Well, there's something wrong with you. The brony culture right now gets a lot of like mockery and derision on 4chan especially. And I decided I'm going to go to a BronyCon. I'm going to find out what all this fuss is about. And I found them to be like some of the nicest like hippy dippy type of sci-fi fans that had a lot of anime fans. A lot of my friends went, and I thought it to have a really, really good vibe. I'm not a brony person myself. I watched the first season and thought, wow, this seems really more for kids. But that was my personal opinion. And
it is a kids. And
yeah.
we did two episodes about this on radio where we were doing a charity fundraiser for the radio station, and somebody paid us $50 to choose the topic of our show.
Thank you, Zach, man.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. And they picked, so it was, we had to do My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, and we had to like it.
Oh, wow.
So we all went and watched it.
We didn't have to like it.
No, but we watched the first season, and then we went and we recorded an episode and realized we had so much more to say that we recorded a second episode about it, because it is a show for kids, specifically geared towards little girls. And I totally get it. But that doesn't make it a bad show, because the
It's a really good show.
fantastic.
Yeah.
The animation is great. The writing is fantastic.
Exactly. The writing is actually, I mean, it's for a younger group, but it's tight. It's what I call tight in the sense that they care about a beginning, middle, and end, a resolution that isn't hackneyed or, the plot of dollar store coloring books. There's actually like some thought that goes into this sort of thing. And I found the brony culture to be very, very nice and supportive. But still, people make fun of it. People make fun of the furry community. So I went to a friend of mine runs a furry con, Furthermore, and I went there, and I found people to be really, really cool. And
the con's name is Furthermore.
Furthermore, yeah.
That's awesome.
I know it's I believe in Tyson Sheraton. My friend Kit runs it. So I went there.
Oh God.
and I wanted to break the stereotypes that I'd been told by the media of what a furry fan was, and it did, because in the furry costumes everybody's kind of equalized. Now I have coulrophobia. I have a little bit of a fear of clowns. I don't like masks. I don't like that sort of thing, but I'm trying to improve my life and try and get over that. So I went to the furry con, and one of the things that surprised me was there was a lot of teenage girls in those fursuits. I did not expect to see that. I also learned a lot of technical engineering stuff about fursuits. They are. And they make jokes about, they're going to have sex in them and all that kind of stuff. You don't, because you don't want to mess it up. They're $2,000 on up. It's like he only buys a muscle car so he can eat burgers in it. No, he's buying that thing and he's treating it like gold. That's how they treat the fursuits. And they were all, again, wonderfully nice, supportive people. I did not see a single creep at this convention.
I think the reason why furries get the negative reputation, it all comes down to that one CSI episode that did not portray
even before
them
that there was a lot of emasculation that was associated with that in My Little Pony, and it's one of those triggers for me. Like, if you're going to totally say this whole group sucks for some reason, I'm going to go and see for myself, because I find that the mob, the mob mentality is really ruins things, and you go and you find these niche cultures.
That adds to a statement that my aunts told me, because I think I've mentioned before that I was raised by all women, and one of the things they told me growing up was that a person is smart, people are stupid. The mob
they said that in Men in Black too.
The mob
I stole it from your aunts.
The mob is stupid, but the people are smart, because people listen, generally speaking. But a group of people, like they get swept up in emotions. It's a very atmospheric thing. I mean, if you can go to it's kind of like a concert, right? It's kind of how good bands have kind of a schedule. how they'll play a certain type of song and they'll feed into other songs, get the crowd super hyped, get the mosh pit going, and then they'll play a song almost immediately after that will mellow the crowd out. Like they calm the atmosphere, they discharge everything, and then they start working them back up, because you can't whip up people into a frenzy and not expect something terrible to happen. And that's why the mob is stupid, because the mob gets swept up so easily because they get caught up in the atmosphere of the thing.
And I will agree with you. I've been sucked up in mob mentality as well, and I've been ashamed of it later, because I'm like, what the heck happened to me? The most benign story I can tell you about this was I don't go to sports things, but my wife used to work for a company that was so hated by all of their customers that even when they tried to give away free hockey tickets, no one would take them. So they just gave them away to employees. And Christine had said, why don't we go to a hockey game? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know anything about hockey.
Yeah, but it's the Capitals. Who wants to go see the Capitals play?
Yeah, that's true.
That's your problem.
You know, but there is a point, like, and I'm not somebody who thought I was into mob mentality, but when the Capitals scored, I found myself standing up and cheering, and then I stopped myself, like, what just happened? Like, I did not consciously do this. So all the stuff that Jason said about mob mentality, it could happen to you, you know, so.
It's funny you mentioned that. There's this great story that Tech and I are constantly referencing back and forth that Henry Rollins talks about when he went to his first Kiss concert. And he talks about how, well, what's with these people that they go to these rock concerts and they put their fist up in the air and they look like a bunch of idiots. Why would you do that? And there I am. I'm standing at the Kiss concert, a band that I am completely uninterested in seeing. And they're playing, and I look up, and my fist is up in the air, and I'm jumping up and down, and I'm looking at my fist saying, what are you doing up there? My fist looks at me, he's like, I don't know, they rock. And that's the thing. Like, you feed off the energy of other people.
Yeah. The solidarity you can find as a unit, right? Like, you know, me and Tech probably can speak about this a little more than you guys, because when you're in the Army and you guys are working together and you get that team aspect, so that when everything's clicking and you as the leader don't have to tell your guys what to do, you don't have to micromanage them, you just show up and it's done, and you just start clicking and everything's rolling and working, and you feel that great solidarity, that union between everyone.
Yep.
That is addictive. That is an addictive feeling. I know people who only like one of the things they only like to do. The only thing they like to do is go to concerts.
Yeah. I have friends like that.
Love that feeling. They love that feeling of being a part of something huge.
Well, why do we go to conventions?
Yeah.
Because we feed off the energy of other geeks. I mean, we've got a bunch of antisocial people all showing up to the same place because we feed off the energy of each other.
I went to I did an interview on radio where I was being interviewed on the topic of fandom, and I mentioned that a geek is nothing more than a person who's unashamed about his passions. Yeah, you could be a geek about anything, whether it's knitting, dancing, sports, cooking, whatever. You're a geek if you are unashamed about your passion. Yeah, and I mentioned that I see no difference between a guy who walks around with a Star Trek shirt and a guy who walks around with a jersey of his favorite team.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I got into a huge argument with my boss about that when he listened to my interview on the radio, and I go back to work and he goes, of course there's a difference because you're a nerd and I'm awesome because I wear my Red Wings jersey. And no, it's the same thing. Do you think you're a Detroit Red Wing? Do you play hockey at a professional level? You do not. Guess what? I'm not a Starfleet engineer.
You're a sports cosplayer is what you are.
Exactly. Yes. And I don't know how to align dilithium crystals as much as you don't know how to play left wing for the Detroit Red Wings. You're a fan. I'm a fan. We choose to show our fans.
And the same people who yell at plot points of like, well, the earlier Trek versus the later Trek, and they get into fights. Same people are in sports bars screaming stuff at a coach that, it's like, yeah, how could you drop that? And it's like he dropped it because he's a human being and people drop things occasionally.
No, I actually did this to someone who's a friend of mine who's a super sports guy. He doesn't like anything we would consider nerdy at all, right? On the surface. We were sitting there one day and we're watching a football game because I'm a Cowboys fan. I'm a diehard Cowboys fan. and we're watching it, and he's like, "Oh my God, how could you? Oh, he dropped that pass. He hit him in his hand." I'm like, "Yeah, he just rolled a 1." He goes, "What?" And then I'm like, and so we keep going.
I'm so using that line, and somebody fumbles something like, "How could he do that? He rolled a 1."
Okay, so
and a natural one at that, you know. And the other guy had a really high Thaco. I don't.
It was a critical fail.
Absolutely. And the best part was I pointed to him because he also did fantasy football. I'm like, "You're literally
there you go."
like,
fantasy
I'm like,
football.
"You're literally just playing Dungeons."
That's fanfic. Fantasy football is
Fantasy
fanfic.
football is D&D for jocks.
It is.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So getting this back to frail masculinity, what are the examples of frail masculinity that bother you as men the most?
Personally, I don't like it when somebody ropes me in as if I agree with them. And I have this problem. Like, I used to work with this guy who every time a girl passed by the store, he would bite his palm like Squiggy did in Happy Days, and he would just follow the woman. And he would come back and he's like, "Oh, you know what I mean? Like, oh, you know what I mean? Oh." And I'm like,
say no more, say no more.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, I really don't know what you mean. Or some of them will be like, "Look at that hot girl." And they're pointing to my field of vision as 20 women in the mall. And I got to figure out which one's the hot one. So I'm always thinking, "Oh, it's a skinny one." "No, not her. She's a brunette." "What does that matter?" You know, it's like, what do you mean it matters? And then they'll say something really esoteric, you know, and I won't even, like, you know, girls with glasses don't get passes. Like, really? I know some of them who have children. Somebody must have married them and given them a pass. I don't know how this happens, you know, but they'll say these things and they'll rope me in as if, as a guy, I'm going to agree with them. And then I have to be the bad guy. I have to be the nerd that goes, "No, she's a person. She's a person with dreams, hopes, fears." You know, it's like, what is this? You know, is this Deepak Chopra's talking? You know, it's like, no, you don't have to be like, you know, listen to meditation in New Age rooms with sewage. You know, she's a person. She is a human being just like you. She has thoughts, and you can't treat her like this. And they look at me like I've got two heads, and it's like, you must be gay. That's, as a teenager, so many people thought I was gay because I talked to women like they were normal, and I liked musicals. Okay,
What's wrong with you?
I know, exactly. You know, and so and now that I've reached my 40s, which is a great decade to reach, because you really stop caring. And I want to say, like, suddenly you get this case of I don't give, you know, and then whatever word you like after that.
It does happen. I just turned 40, and like on my birthday, 10 a.m., boom, I just don't care.
Yeah. It's just like, you went to BronyCon? Well, that's really gay. And it's like, yeah, I was pretty happy. I ended up buying, like, I got a badge that had my pony personality on it. I never had that happen before. Have you? Well, no. You know, and it's like, why are you so upset? You are so, you look at the world with this narrow view, and your whole day is ruined. People are like, "Why can't I get a girl, like, you know, to sleep with me?" Because you're treating her like she's meat. So the only girls that you are attracting are people that feel bad about themselves.
And you're only looking at women as something that will sleep with you.
Yeah.
I think
So what bothers?
There is so much more out there than sex. Sex is great. Don't get me wrong, but
Tech will agree with me when I say this. You don't look at women as meat. You look at meat as meat.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, look at that steak. Oh, meaty rare.
exactly.
Oh.
Right. So
I'd
what
slather
bothers?
mushrooms on that thing.
So what bothers me the most is that they say that men treat women like sexual objects, but yet when men have to sell things to other men, they treat me like nothing more than a sexual object. So
Yeah.
in music, if it is a woman singing on stage, the only reason they think I'll pay attention is if I'm titillated.
I can't listen to trance at work because the YouTube video always has like some half-naked woman in a bikini with headphones on a beach. I'm like, she's going to get those things wet. Those are a $300 pair of headphones.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to buy that car. That girl with the bikinis all over the hood. Remove her,
He's
please.
going to scratch the paint. It took him all day to polish it. Get Tony Katane off the hood of the Jag. She's going to knock the hood.
That booth babe is in the way of my comic books. Get her out of here.
Get out of the way. And it's, you know, if you look at music of the 60s, pre-video era, we didn't give a crud what people looked like. That's when we had people like Janis Joplin and Cass Elliot that today could not get a recording contract. And think of all the wonderful, fantastic music.
Now with directly publishing, they can. But up until like there was direct to customer type of stuff. Yeah, you're right. I mean, everyone made fun of that one girl in Wilson Phillips because she was overweight. Like, that's not their right. Like Candace Cameron, who played DJ on Full House, constantly got told she was the fat girl. Like,
right, she got
she got an eating disorder from that. Yeah, she got an eating. You're right. Yeah.
You know, the thing that makes me angry, and this is probably going to be verging on that PG rating, Nutty, but.
All right, what's your pet peeve?
It's when guys are like, oh man, I had like 3 girls last weekend. I'm like, so you none of them caught your attention? You didn't think about maybe like, talking to them or something like that? Maybe trying to strike up a relationship. Why would I date a girl like that?
Put a bag on her and do your business. It's like, what?
Why would a girl date a guy like you then? If that's the case,
put a flag over her face. Do it for the country.
Yeah, just what? Why back and think of England? I guess that's the male version.
And I am not a man, but to me, when I hear stuff like that, I'm like, so what's the difference between that and you taking care of you?
Exactly. That's
if it doesn't matter the person.
It drives me nuts because I'm like, so you're saying that you could have sex with 4 girls in a weekend, but if you tried to date any of those girls because they had sex with guys that weekend, they're terrible. They're like, really?
And most of those guys are lying anyway. They didn't really like when they say that they were with 3 women, they really meant that they saw a picture of 3 women and then had a very lonely night, on certain websites. So, this PG rating.
Example of that point, Jason. And I'll give another example. And that's one that really bothers me. So, example, we were talking about the cartoon "Oh My Goddess," and I have always had a crush on Belle Dandy. And I mentioned that to somebody that, oh man, look at this comic book, like Belle Dandy, she's awesome, she's so hot. And the guy would look at me and go, "It's a cartoon." Like, so
porn is like real life cartoon.
Like, and then I'm at his place and he's got like, this is the 90s, right? So he's got a poster of Samantha Fox on his wall.
Yeah.
And she is no more real to me and no more fake than Belle Dandy is, because I have an equal opportunity to have relations with both of them.
Yeah.
So whether it's a photograph of a real person or someone who drew something else.
I'm old. I'm thinking of Farrah Fawcett. Like
same thing.
Or that one famous poster of the tennis playing girl adjusting her underpants under the skirt.
Yeah,
like, I have as much of a chance of meeting her as I do meeting Major Motoko Kusanagi from Ghost in the Shell. So what does it really matter?
And to add to that, she's like that Samantha Fox is like a cartoon too, because they put that up, special filters, airbrush. If you see
silicone.
Exactly. There's a reason that people like making Whoopi like in dark places, trying to keep that PG thing right? Because it's going to be like if you really look at it, like in a real life, people have cellulite deposit, moles, that sort of thing. Go to a nudist beach and you'll be like, oh, nudity really isn't what I thought it was. But
is the people that are nude are not the people you want to look at.
Yeah, well, that's kind of cruel, but it is.
Well, because people don't look like the idealized version of themselves.
Nobody looks like Samantha Fox in the poster. Samantha Fox doesn't look like Samantha Fox
exactly.
in the poster.
You know what? Point proven. People who say that, probably people who say, well, why do you think that cartoon's hot? That's a cartoon. We'll go home and watch porn. You know what? No one stays immaculate during sex. I'm sorry. They don't have the perfect makeup. No. That's not how that works.
I've got rants that are not appropriate for this show about that.
There's a pretty funny College Humor video. I think it's College Humor. It could be cracked. But it's what if sex was shown on TV like it really is. And it's really funny. I highly recommend you go look at it. It came out years and years ago.
Especially if you're 13, because then you'll go, oh, maybe I should focus on other things.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of videos on that very hot Nutty. Everybody has done this gag of everybody trying shower sex the way it
Yeah.
appears
Oh,
on
yeah.
TV and getting like
Yeah.
murdered and paralyzed.
Wow.
And it
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
doesn't work.
So anyway, one piece of frail masculinity that I'm going to bring up, I am not a man, but it is something that bugs me. Why is it that one's masculinity and to be a real man, again, I'm putting air quotes here because I think that there is no wrong way to be a man, just
Remind
like
me
there's no
about that.
wrong way to be a geek. It's intrinsically tied to their sexual prowess. It is,
Oh yeah.
how many women have you been with? And when someone wants to put someone down, it's, oh, you have a small member. Or if they see your car driving by, oh, I bet he has a tiny one and he's overcompensating and all of these other things. Why is that the key?
The first time I saw a real Ferrari 360 drive by, and I'm a massive tifosi. I love Ferrari. I see a real bright red Ferrari 360 drive by, and I cheer, and I'm like, yeah, beautiful car.
You reacted like the car in Cars. A real Michael Schumacher Ferrari?
Exactly. And the thing is, and the guy saw me cheering on the side of the road, and he dropped a gear, and he revved it for me, and he screamed that beautiful Ferrari V12 or V8. It was a 360. He screamed the V8 as he went across the intersection for me, and it was a beautiful sound, and I loved it. And there was a woman behind me going, oh, he only bought that car because he's got a tiny unit. No, he bought that car because he's got money and he likes Ferraris.
Yeah.
That is a sour grapes type of response.
Yeah,
to be honest, unless they cut you off in the freeway, and then all bets are off. But
to me, that's very much like when somebody sees somebody on YouTube or on the internet or something, and they built like this, model of the Death Star that takes up an entire room, and they have everything right, including the ports or whatever it is.
I had free time to do something like that.
Why don't you spend your time doing something more productive?
Or better yet, looks like he's not getting laid tonight. Actually,
exactly. Going back to the frail masculinity.
Actually, he probably is, because there's probably some Star Wars fans out there who are like, "Oh my God, let me see your Death Star."
Now,
hey, would you like to see my Death Star?
I'm sorry, I'm using that line from now on.
one of the ancillary things about, like, saying somebody, that guy has a small pee-pee because he drives this type of thing. The emasculation, and it's like I said earlier, when I played with, like, quote unquote girls' toys when I was young, is because it wasn't so much like, if a girl played with cars, maybe she'd be called a tomboy, but it wasn't as strong as when you were a guy and you were playing with girl toys. And I'm remembering something by Ian McEwan in Cement Garden, where he says girls can wear jeans and cut their hair short and wear shirts and boots because it's okay to be a boy. For girls, it's like a promotion. But for a boy to look like a girl is degrading, because according to you, you secretly believe that being a girl is degrading. And
what do we call men that we don't think are real men? They're all intrinsically lined with women.
Exactly. Or gay, or they don't have the qualities of masculinity that he should have. He should be the Marlboro guy on the horse and whatnot, getting lung cancer. But for a girl to look like, oh, she's butch, and I have friends, girlfriends in the punk community who get a lot of boyfriends who think they can tame that filly. That kind of thing. It's like, oh, I will get you down to being a real woman because you're only like that. You're only acting masculine because you haven't met a real man before. And a lot of this is, again, the whole concept of being a girl being degrading. And I think that guy that came into Jason's store and said, like, well, I can't, because he believes that being a girl is degrading. And that's the saddest part of this person's life, because he
couldn't play a game with a girl in it, bro. You understand?
No, get out of here,
bro.
I have to mention. I have to give shout outs to my grade 9 health teacher, Mr. John Hunter, who gave me probably some of the best advice I've ever had in my life, and I give it to my students now that I'm a teacher. And it was one of those like life-changing things that I didn't figure out till later. So we're learning health, and he's got like pictures up of genitals, and we're learning about plumbing. And he puts it all away for a second, and he goes, I want to talk to you guys about being a man, because there's no such thing as being more or less of a man.
Yeah.
And that nothing you do, nothing you like will make you more or less of a man. You could be big or little, athletic or scholarly, fat or thin, black or white. It doesn't matter. There is no such thing as being more or less of a man. That is something that you define yourself. So if anybody tells you that you're not enough of a man because you don't X instead of Y, they are wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we can all agree with that. Yeah.
I hope
And
so.
And I completely agree with that. And it's also culturally pressured into people of race. Like, you know, well, if a black person is successful, he's sold out, you know, or if a white
woman
person
is successful, she slept her way to the top.
Or she's a bitch, you know, she's
right,
or she's frigid,
cold,
yeah,
right, she's frigid or something like that. And it's like, why does her being CEO have anything to do? Like, I don't want to have sex with this woman. I want her as a leader. But in order for her to be a leader, she's got to be a certain, you know, like it's a mess. And yeah.
No, that plays directly to how I was raised, because I was raised by all women. I never knew my father, and all the women in my family, across the board, by almost every man outside of our family, would have considered them a bitch. My Aunt Nancy grew up through the 60s, 70s, and 80s. She ended up making her own business. She ran her own business. She didn't have help from her husband or anything like that. And so that was a huge, huge issue, because when someone came into the business and had an issue, they wanted to speak to the one in charge, and it was her.
Yeah.
And when it comes down to it, you know, they taught me how to do things that at the time were not considered to be manly, quote unquote. I learned how to sew. I learned how to cook.
Yeah.
I learned how to iron. By the way, all the 13-year-old boys out there listening, if you want to get attention in college, learn to cook, bro.
Yeah.
And
not just learn to cook well.
Yeah.
And learn more than just ramen, because I know a lot of people like, oh, I know how to cook because I can read directions on the back of ramen. And I want to say to those people, like, what's the difference between the flashpoint of butter and olive oil, and why does that matter?
I see, and I want to say to them, what's tare? Oh, you don't know how to cook ramen. Tech, who does the ironing in this house?
Now that's elitism right there. Like, you're not a real ramen eater.
I know. I'm totally gatekeeping there.
Right. So
I'll answer this question. I'm pretty sure it's the military man who has to make sure the creases are perfect.
Absolutely. So I know how to iron. The Army taught me how to iron, and I happen to think I'm pretty good at it. And I've yet to have a person complain about my ironing. So even like when I was living in a house with another Army guy, you know, your roommates, he was better at polishing boots than I was. I was better at ironing than he was. So it just became a division of labor. He would polish my boots and I'd iron his uniform. And then we got like a rep because we were both really good at it. So I would get guys that would come up to me with like all of their uniforms that needed ironing, and I do it. And we would have a lineup of boots outside the front door of the house of guys that wanted their boots polished by my roommate, and he would polish them with like $10 in the tongue of each like pair of boots, right? Because, you know, and so we would go ahead and we would do it this way. But and even now, when I go to Balticon, when I go to conventions, I'll put out a message on Twitter that I'm ironing in my room right now. If anybody else needs something ironed, come on up to the room and let's talk. And I'll get the one year I had a lineup of people waiting to get costumes ironed, shirts ironed. I pressed a couple dresses. And then
have you heard of extreme ironing? Extreme ironing? That's a sport. I wish we had show notes to link stuff to, but you know, look up extreme ironing. But continue. I'm sorry.
No, and the one time I had lost a button on my vest. And there was a sewing circle that was going on the Saturday morning at Balticon in one of the rooms. And I went into the sewing circle and I'm like, I lost a button on my vest. Can I get a needle and thread? And they're like, oh, do you need us to do that for you? I said, no, I just need a needle and thread. I can sew my own button on. You know how to sew? Of course I do. Who doesn't know how to put a button back on?
Hey, when I was in basic and AIT, $5 a button, you came to this guy.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I mean, dude, I never had to use my money to go to the PX.
That's awesome.
I'm sorry, did you just say this girl?
Right here.
Oh, I thought he called himself a girl. I'm like, wait,
Why?
what?
You know what? Yeah, you come to this girl. Woo!
Anyway, so I think we can all agree that there's nothing that you can do that makes you less of a man, and we need to try to avoid this mob mentality of certain things not being manly. Yeah?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
All right. So on that note, yes, I'm totally stealing that from you, Jason, again.
Patrons.
Oh, yes. Sorry. 2 seconds. So before we check out of here, is there anything that anybody wants to say, to add on to this, Jerry Springer final thoughts?
I when I was young, my parents went to a sexual education thing. They were changing the sex ed in our school, and my parents left in the middle of it, not because they were offended by what they saw, but they were offended by what they didn't see. And they said they're still not teaching you anything. And so they let me go to the library at age 12, and I got any book I wanted. And one of them was called Our Bodies, Ourselves, and it was considered the handbook for women. And I read that thing cover to cover, absolutely fascinated by it, and I recommend that every man read that book, just at least to get an insight and an understanding of women as real human beings.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Jason, any final thoughts?
Honestly, my true thoughts I can't say on this podcast because they begin with an F and a U. To anyone who thinks just because you like something and it would be socially considered girly or a woman thing to do, you can go F yourself, right? But my main thing is,
the heck with y'all. The heck with darn it all to heck.
But my main thing is, seriously, if you look at the things, like, here's the deal. Anybody can lift something heavy. Anybody can build something. But it takes skill and finesse to do a lot of the things that are considered feminine. To sew, there is deftness in the hands and a finesse that you just don't have unless you actually take the time and effort and put in the work. Yeah. You can't cook unless you take the time and effort and put it, and put the finesse in. I can't bake. I don't have that amount of finesse, but I can darn sure grill, and there's finesse and skill in that as well. But yet cooking still considered, although I think it's coming around, especially with people like Gordon Ramsay, it's coming around to be more of just a unisex thing. But a lot of people still consider it to be a feminine thing, that a woman should be in the kitchen, blah, 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 blah. Jen will tell you all the time. Most of the time, I used to be the one cooking. Now I don't. She gets mad because I'm a pretty good cook and she hates eating her own food, but most cooks don't have their own food. So seriously, look at the strength it takes to do something that is considered feminine. Or in the case of women, look at the skill it takes them to do something that's considered masculine, and see the difference in how the strength it has for them to do that versus for someone else saying that it's feminine or against them and it's not good for them to do it. Pay attention because you learn things.
Mm-hmm.
Tech?
Sex sells. And if you want me to stop, if the
Ferrari. But sex doesn't sell your Ferrari.
No, because she's in the way of the Ferrari.
Right. So here's the problem. It's that if you want me, if the current social message is that I have to treat women as bigger objects than more than just their genitals, I demand the same thing, and I want to be treated more than just my genitals. So
Amen.
Sex sells. But I think it is the cheapest and dumbest way to get your product across. If the only way you can sell your comic book is to have a booth babe jiggling in front of your product, I'm not going to pay attention, because the only reason you want to sell me your comic is with sex. And sex is great. I'm not discounting that. But right. I think it is the cheapest, most primal way to sell something. And if that's your number one way to sell your product, it's not worth buying.
Well, and in general, it means that the story is lacking.
Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me of those places, those convenience stores that just have nothing in their windows but a whole bunch of unmatching scrolling LED signs that show they have lotto and show they have long distance cards or whatever. And it's just so much noise in your face and nothing matches. That's what a lot of that stuff looks like to me. It's cheap. It's not thought out. It's unintelligent, and it's to the base of like flashing in your face, like, look, boobalage, to look at the booblas, and you're like, oh, okay, I get it. She has boobs. Okay, fine,
And they're nice and well done, but can I buy a lotto ticket now?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. This was awesome. Before we go, I just want to thank the patrons. I want to thank Jason Banks. I wonder who that guy is.
Thanks, Daddy.
I want to thank Jax. I want to thank Beth, Rich the TT, Dagny, Mike, Ken, Lynette, Aurora Lee, Susan, Melissa, Susanna, Kinsey, Ian, Harold, Jen, Patrick, and Shane. Thank you, everybody, for donating to the Patreon. And because of you guys, we have 2 episodes a month. And this has been a lot of fun doing these 2 episodes. So thank you to my guests for joining us and for pretty much running this whole episode. This was really an interesting chat for me to be able to just sit in on. I enjoyed myself so much, and so much of what you each said, I would love to do like a whole episode on just each of these points because it's so interesting. But thank you for joining us. Now, Grig, where can people find you on the internet, and where can they buy your books?
They can buy my books on Amazon.com. Again, it's Grig, G-R-I-G, Larson, L-A-R-S-O-N. I'm also at griglarson.net. You can links right to my Amazon page. You can look for my Twitter under Punk Walrus, or you can see me at a multitude of conventions. I'm going to be at Potterverse this coming weekend, and I'm usually at Balticon, AwesomeCon. I still run Artist Alley for KatsuCon, so you can see me there. So I'm willing to talk to anybody about anything.
And Jason, where can people find you on the internet?
See, Nutty, you missed your opportunity. Before you introduced Grig, you should have said, and on that note.
On that note, Jason, where can people find you?
I'm Jason, one of the 2 hosts of the Talk Nerdy to Me podcast, and you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/nerdytome and on Twitter at Nerdy to Me podcast, and of course on our website at Talk Nerdy to Me at talknerdytomepodcast.com.
And the 2 is the number 2.
Yes, it is.
Tech.
You can find everything I've done at nimlast.org. You can find me on Twitter at FlyingUkemi, Ukemi. And soon, as soon as I decide to record more episodes and actually get my butt in the editing bay, you can find my podcast, Upside Down and Flying, at upsidedownandflying.ca.
Yes. And currently that goes to your essays.
All right, that goes to my essays, where you can read about the trials and tribulations that I have had in trying to learn martial arts the hard way.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Bye.
Bye.
All right. And recording off. Thank you, everyone in YouTube land, although I think Shane is gone for the night. It's pretty late over there in the UK. Thanks again, Grig, for joining us so many times. When you were talking, I just wanted to scream and clap. There were certain things. I would love to have you back on anytime. You totally fit in here.
Yeah, I would love to be a part of it. People ask me to do a podcast because they say I have a voice for radio, but I can never think of anything really to have a theme about, because I just wander all over the place. So I'd rather have somebody else choose the topic, and then I'll just hop on.
Just take the low-hanging fruit and do an anime podcast.
That's kind of my whole deal. Is I'm a little bit of an ADD podcast because I couldn't settle on anything either. But I'll tell you, for years and years, I did the same thing. I just guested on a bunch of other podcasts, and it's totally the way to go if you can get it, because
it's what I do.
Yeah.
Well,
we had a panel at Balticon, and it was podcasting 101, and Tech came to the audience so that he could add in his best tip for podcasting.
My absolute best tip for editing a podcast is marry an editor.
Yeah. Marry a good podcaster. There you go.
I was on the podcast with Rogue, where I did most of the talking. It was called Fireside Chats. We just used to attend events and constantly riff on it. Now, Rogue is the perfect person. It's Jada Adams. She's going to be a Potterverse. You probably know her. And
we know Jada.
if you can get her on your podcast, keeping it PG will be a little difficult because she did say on Bomb Shelter Radio, prolapsed cunt, which absolutely caused Fuzzface to lose it. He's like, you can't say that on the air. There's an FCC thing about it. What? She's a prolapsed cunt. And I was like, no. And he was talking about some politician. I don't know.
So note to self: if we ever have Jada on, it'll have to be on my podcast.
Yeah, She is
totally fine.
so wonderful. I miss doing them with her. She used to be my roommate downstairs for about 3 years. So, if you can get her on your podcast, you should. Any podcast you want to have me on, I probably have the time because I'm ramping down a lot of my convention work, and I'm looking more for stuff like this. Kind of also for self-promotion because I'm going to be writing a lot more. So
yeah,
I had a really good time.
Are you watching?
Yeah, I had a blast.
Any new anime right now?
Am I what?
Are you watching any new anime right now?
Oh God. Okay. Because of my friend Sam, of the Clockwork Dolls, every time you go to his house, he's like, I've got this great anime for you. And it's Keijo.
Oh,
I'm gonna just stop the broadcast here.